Oh, you're reading.
Well, I made you a chai. We've got a long one to read today.
Ooh, that's an excellent idea. I see you have a cuppa as well.
Yes,
All
and
right.
it's called To Munich, and it's a continuation of our reading for Corona Story Time of the Bavarian Airship Regatta.
All right, let's go.
Herr Axel Richter's feet dangled, wishing to touch the floor. He was a slight, bookish man, with wisps of gray in his hair and small, round glasses. Bjorn Swenson, the Swedish airship captain, was pinning him against the support columns, his two meaty fists clutching Herr Richter's jacket lapels, the waistcoat and shirt underneath, and a good bit of the man's armpit skin. Their eyes were at the same level, despite that Captain Swenson would normally tower over the German. "Answer me!" the Swede boomed in his native language into Herr Richter's face. "Which question?" Herr Richter weakly responded. His Swedish was passable. Even though Captain Swenson, as well as the rest of the crew, knew German, the captain made it clear that Swedish, and only Swedish, was to be spoken on the North Wind. "All of them. Are we still racing? Are we in danger if we continue? Why haven't you called off the race?" Herr Richter swallowed hard and looked around using only his eyeballs. What a sight to see! The North Wind's boiler room was larger than most racing airships, and was normally better lit than most, given its series of square windows that ran the length of both sides of the craft. But right now, additional light was flooding in from where the very tidy galley used to be, which was now a jumble of birch planks, cooking utensils, and broken stone and glassware, all covered with a light dusting of flour. He saw the crew hard at work trying to clear the area in hopes of patching up the breaches in the port and starboard side. "I had no idea," Herr Richter stammered out. "King Maximilian's men said they would leave us be. You must understand, we were told that the regatta was safe to pass over Melkold. I was told not to stop the race." Captain Swenson made a face that clearly indicated his questions were still not being answered directly, and he slid Herr Richter a couple of inches higher. It's safe. Continue to Munich as fast as you can. I'm not calling off the race," Herr Richter squealed, kicking his feet uselessly around. Captain Swenson shouted his commands into the face of the official, even though they were meant for the crew. "Bring up the boiler to full. Clear the galley debris. Use the broken planks to feed the firebox. Replank the hulls from interior walls and make her fast as best you can. Flank speed, boys! Flank speed!" The 12-man crew redoubled their activity. They tossed splintered boards from the galley area towards the boiler room. They shoved planks whole into the secondary stage firebox to heat the boiler tubes to red hot. Captain Swenson slid the official down to his feet and left him standing, alone and unimportant. The Swede turned and clambered up his ladder to the bridge, while Herr Richter sheepishly adjusted his glasses. Captain Swenson yelled to his co-pilot, "We must fly! I don't know if it is safe here, and the race is still in progress. Spare nothing! To Munich!" The North Wind had been designed and constructed by Captain Swenson so that its birch planks were of uniform size and fastened together in a regular manner. His primary reason for this painstaking process was to allow for easy configuration at the start of a regatta and to reduce the difficulty of obtaining replacement planks. He had never thought that he would be reconfiguring his airship during an actual race, but a captain has to do what a captain has to do. Rather than using bulky nuts and bolts, the North Wind used small threaded fasteners that could be loosened with a handheld L-shaped hexagonal-sided bar. One or two quick twists, and the interior wall planks popped free from their supports, ready for hull repair. Behind the north wind, a musket shot sounded, and the middle of the 3 black balloons suddenly stopped supporting the center of the substantial rope net. As the structure started to collapse, a figure of a man leapt off the top of the net, significantly slowing his fall with a bright patchwork of cloth puffed out above him. The north wind's bank of propellers whirled to a frightening speed, and the airship sprinted forward. To Sparky, watching the north wind as it rushed away, it appeared as if unpainted birch planks were magically materializing from within, healing the craft's wounds. And the ship was galloping away as a healthy beast. Her competitive drive kicked in. In a flurry of activity, she and Jake on the Birkenhare's bridge maneuvered their vessel, adjusting to the steeper angle of climb to avoid the descending net. While the Birkenhare was efficiently stalled in mid-air, the Iron Eagle shot past the Birkenhare's starboard side at an abrupt angle, breaching over the rope webbing, clearly in hot pursuit of the north wind. Sparky yelled a few choice words, nothing that Jake hadn't heard before down at the docks, but not from a woman. She grabbed the voice pipe. "The race is on, lads! Give me all you can! Take boiler number 2 up to 90% and keep an eye on her." Sparky knew her best strategy was not to try to catch up with the north wind. The true race was with the Iron Eagle. That was, of course, if the north wind didn't get too far ahead. Due to a slight headwind, she wanted to actually stay behind the Iron Eagle, let it do the work, and then come from behind. But as before, she couldn't directly draft. They had to stay back enough to be legal, but close enough to take advantage of the Iron Eagle's blocking the current. Out of the starboard side, Sparky could see the tail of the Iron Eagle as it continued to increase its speed, still tipped. Sparky feathered the controls to sneak in behind the German airship. Unexpectedly, the Iron Eagle nosed up even farther. Sparky muttered, "That doesn't make a good deal of racing sense." Jake gasped and pointed to the figure of a man, clearly a pirate from his garb, tumble spread eagle off the back of the Iron Eagle's envelope. As if it was any consolation, the man just barely missed the whirling propeller before he plunged into the valley below. Jake watched, open-mouthed, as the man dropped. "Don't watch," Sparky offered, but Jake couldn't heed her advice. The Iron Eagle leveled off. There was a small band of her crew on the aft catwalk that had been watching to verify that they had rid the airship of its unwanted passenger. They let out a whoop when they confirmed the desired outcome. Sparky was unsure that this was the right thing for a young man to see. "I wish I could have spared you of that," she said quietly. Jake worked hard to get the words out. I appreciate that, but this is a fight, and I am here to do my part. I just didn't expect to see another man die." Erasmus appeared at the bridge's doorway. His crimson hand was pressed hard against his right temple to staunch the bleeding, but it was failing. Fresh blood was dripping from between his fingers, staining the front and sleeve of his jacket. His voice was steady but somber. "Doctor, this may not be the best time, but I could use your assistance in securing my wound." Sparky turned to Jake, inquiring about his confidence. "Can you hold her steady right here at the tail of the Iron Eagle? Be honest with me." "I believe so. It will only be a few minutes. I'll get one of the boiler room lads to give you a hand, but I must mend our chief inspector." Sparky grabbed the voice pipe once again and requested Mr. Wilkinson to come to the bridge to stand in for her. She turned and grabbed Erasmus by the arm. "Come with me. I have a kit in my cabin." "Much obliged," he replied. But on his way to the cabin, he found himself with the odd feeling that he was assigned to the Birkenhare to protect the passengers and was now dependent on others to put him right. He understood teamwork, but this was, well, different. He was supposed to be the one fighting the good fight, not amplifying the problem. Sparky stated flatly, "I know what you're thinking. Stop it. You did a great deed in confronting and resisting the marauders. Let me patch you up. Is my stoicism showing? I had hoped to conceal that affliction. If I had time, I'd lance that delightful masculine virtue. Erasmus managed to smile. Inside Sparky's cabin, she led Erasmus to a chair, retrieved her medical kit, a bottle of alcohol, and a clean cloth, and sat down in a chair facing him. On my command, remove your hand. I'll wipe the area once, see the extent of the damage, and then I want you to pinch the wound closed with both of your hands. Then I will sew you back together as best I can. I will fix you up properly in Munich, assuming we get there safe and sound. This will hurt, if that makes you feel better. She smiled at him quickly, immediately followed by her serious doctor expression. Ready? Now. The door of the bridge flew open. Mr. Wilkinson took a quick step in and surveyed the situation. The Birken Hare was a tad over 50 yards away from the back of the Iron Eagle, a safe distance, but proceeding at close to full speed. Jake was at the co-pilot's helm, with one hand on the rudder control and the other on the throttle. He was white as a sheet. He didn't want to make a single mistake. A trickle of sweat dripped from his forehead and landed on his left eyelash, but he didn't move a muscle, or even blink. Steady, lad. I am here to help ye. Mr. Wilkinson stepped up to the pilot's controls and took them softly. You can relax now. I got her. Jake forced his hands off the levers and took a small, unsteady step backwards. Snapping out of his stupor, he blinked hard twice, wiping his forehead with his sleeve, and took hold of the handholds to steady himself. Jake's voice faltered through his confession. I've piloted a few boats on the Thames and ridden my share of horses. This was like directing a flatboat with an elephant on it through a flood. Every touch made the whole ship move. I just wanted to hold it steady. You did fine, lad. Take a breather. Mr. Wilkinson smiled to himself. He was used to minor docking maneuvers, and he had handled this size craft in moderate winds, but under near full speed, the Birken Hare was no easy piloting task. Jake's labors at the helm put him at ease a bit, knowing that he would have an easier time of it. Still, he looked forward to Dr. McTrowell's return, allowing him to retreat to his sanctuary below. The bridge door opened a second time, and Herr Fenstermacher marched in. He had gotten his confidence back, as if he had not personally caused anything of consequence. This is quite unusual to switch pilots. Do you gentlemen know what you are doing? He queried. Dr. McTrowell nodded off the stitches, retrieved a pair of small scissors, and cut the thread. I had no catgut available, so I used silk. I'm afraid that we will most likely need to reopen the wound and resuture it when we have the time and facilities. Queen Ishield did you a disservice by adding an extra jab at the end of her cut. The wound is deeper than it appears. My handiwork will keep you from bleeding externally. However, you will be developing a serious bruise. I'm afraid this may leave your countenance quite rakish and dashing. Just what I need, Erasmus joked. Then he became serious again. I must let you get back to the bridge. Without Sergeant Fox, I need to verify the safety of the vessel myself. He started to stand. Not so fast. I need to wrap a bandage on your head to keep this clean. This will only take a minute. She produced a spool of gauze that she wrapped over his eyebrows, across the wound site, and around the back of his head. 3 times she circled his head before deftly knotting it in the back. While Sparky was performing this action, she added, You were lucky. It appears that she was taking aim at your right eye. I think that was her second choice, actually. If I had not dodged most of her initial cut, she would have sliced me from neck to crown, if I may be so blunt. Sparky winced at the thought. She stood up, wiped her hands on a clean cloth, and proclaimed, You hold, my dear Chief Inspector. Now I need to return to the bridge. And with that, she tossed the cloth to Erasmus, turned and left, leaving the door open for Erasmus's exit. Erasmus cleaned himself up as much as he saw fit. The blood on his clothes would just have to be addressed later. He found a hand mirror on the side table and held it up to survey the bandage. The silk thread was black, and he could make it out through the 3 layers of gauze. Sparky's work was a row of tidy X's on the hillside of unhappy skin that was already distended and angry. He reached up and lightly touched the bandage that was over the wound, causing himself to flinch. Well, he thought, no wearing my bowler any time soon. As he left the cabin, he mentally checked off the things he wanted to do in priority order. He needed to check on the prisoners to make sure that they were still secured, check on the status of the boiler number 2, and then go room to room to verify that they didn't have any unexpected guests aboard and that the crew and passengers were safe. And, finally, he needed to check on the exterior locations where somebody could be hiding. That included the top of the envelope, despite his shoulder injury and a touch of anxiety about returning to the site of his near death. Perhaps he could get some aid in that pursuit. Erasmus proceeded directly to cabin number 2. He knocked loudly to make sure that he would be heard over the engines, which seemed to roar more than usual. Ironically, the door to cabin 1 opened. There stood Reginald Wallace, still in his undergarments, a near-empty bottle of whiskey in his hand. "Did you want to see me?" Reginald slurred. "Have we finished the race? Did we win?" "Not quite, but I do suggest you get fully dressed for the ceremony," Erasmus teased. "Capital idea. We can talk about my wife at that time." Without waiting for Erasmus's answer, Reginald closed the door. Erasmus immediately heard some shuffling from within cabin 1 when the door to cabin 2 opened. Lord Ashley had opened his own door, and it was clear that he and Virat had been busy putting the cabin into some semblance of organization after the removal of most of the silk cloth. They had made good progress, but cushion padding and cotton wads were still scattered about. Virat was still scooping up the fluffy masses and stuffing them into a cotton pillowcase. "Erasmus, nice bandage. No doubt Dr. McTrowell's efforts. How can I be of service?" "I need to secure the vessel, but my right shoulder is quite impaired. Can you and Virat verify that the top of the envelope is secure?" Lord Ashley glanced quickly in Virat's direction and received a nod of approval. "Why, of course. We'll be right on it. We just need to stock up on throwing knives. We'll see you as soon as we get back." "Thank you, my dear friend." Erasmus turned and headed to the common room where Queen Eschilde and her 2 confederates were secured. They were seated on the floor, leaning back on the aft wall of the chamber. They were not happy. Erasmus gave them a good look over. Not only were they manacled behind their backs, but they were also tied about the arms and ankles. To add a measure of security, the ropes about their arms were also secured to a rope handhold that was affixed waist-high on the wall. It allowed them enough slack to sit on the floor. This was to allow the Queen to keep weight off of her leg, which was still weeping a dark stain into her black stockings and skirt. Eschilde was glaring at Erasmus. "My leg needs attention. Fetch a physician." Erasmus thought for a second and replied unsympathetically, "I think not." He punctuated the response with a light kick to the sole of her right boot, causing her to wince in pain. She snarled at him and grimaced for a second with the continued pain of the wound. Erasmus offered his reasoning. "My blade was thin and sharp, not like your meat chopper of a cutlass. You see, you are hardly bleeding. Our doctor is busy, and you will live until Munich. It will help if you hold still. I would hate to have them amputate. It would be a waste of a perfectly good boot." The pirate next to her could not sit idly by any longer. "Cut your tongue out myself, I will, talking like that to me queen," he hissed out between his too few teeth. Erasmus smiled. "Love to stay and chat, but I have a vessel to secure. Just stay here in our sitting room. We shall be arriving at your jailhouse before you know it." He headed down the stairs to check on boiler number 2. Halfway down he met Luis Miguel, who was carrying a cutlass, followed by Tobias. Hello, Luis Miguel, what are you doing?" "Taking the prisoner to cabin for locking up." "Then why is he behind you?" "Tobias, did you surrender?" "Aye," Tobias sighed, and he told Erasmus the shortened version of how he didn't want to be involved in this raid in the first place. He just wanted to go home. "Luis Miguel, hand me the cutlass. Place Tobias in cabin number 9, and tell Aldrich Fremont to watch him. It will make Aldrich useful, and serve him right." As he passed, Erasmus patted his old friend Tobias on the back, and Tobias responded in kind. Sparky entered the bridge, saw the 3 men, and felt the tension in the air. She didn't have time for this. "Good job, men. I'll take it from here. Herr Fenstermacher, if you have something to say it to me." Mr. Wilkinson relinquished the helm to Sparky with the tip of his workman's cap, and made a hasty exit out of the bridge door. "Nothing at this time, Doctor." Herr Fenstermacher followed this with an unpleasant smile, but he held his ground and stayed on the bridge, as if he were waiting for some racing violation that he could use against the crew. Sparky ignored him. "Mr. Fremont, let's finish this race." Erasmus continued his tour. Boiler number 2 was holding steady at 90%. None of the cabins had any issues, although Reginald was truly struggling to get himself fully dressed. Aldrich did not like his assignment, but grudgingly accepted it. Lord Ashley and Verrat returned to proclaim that not only was the envelope clear of marauders, but they had crawled the length of the envelope and meticulously didn't find any punctures in the envelope surface. The 3 of them together verified that the catwalk was clear of interlopers, and Erasmus reported to Sparky the security of the Burke and Hare. Bjorn Swenson could see the steeples of Munich in the distance. "Good, good," he said out loud in Swedish. The first mate stepped onto the bridge. "Captain Swenson, to maintain flank speed, we have used all the broken planks as fuel. We need to be switching back to coal." "No. Start removing the interior walls and burn them too. We must increase our lead as best we can. The removed walls will also lighten our load. Keep the boilers at 120% or higher." "Aye, aye." The first mate disappeared, and the sound of industry continued as the interior walls came down and the engine roared on. Willie Dampf knew he had a fast airship, but with the Burke and Hare as close as legally possible, it would still come down to a sprint. Willie conferred with his co-pilot, young Herr von Zeppelin. "We have tried going faster than the Burke and Hare, and we have tried changing altitude. So far, Dr. McTrowell has outmaneuvered us twice. How about we fake our final sprint early?" "Ja, that may work. Or you can do the opposite. While they are following, slow down slightly a good distance from the finish. They will either slow down themselves, or they'll swing alongside of us to pass. Either way, we are free to sprint to the finish. We have a faster vessel, even if they have more fuel." "A sound plan, but it must be done at the right time. We need to be ahead by more than 3 seconds. The young co-pilot grabbed a compass, scale, and pencil out of his tool pouch and turned to the detailed chart of Munich, already marked with the visual points for dead reckoning. With a quick calculation in the margin and 2 swings of his compass, he marked 1 point along their trajectory. "Here is the optimal point for the start of their sprint." A couple more calculations and a pair of compass movements, and he marked another location. "Here is the best deceleration point to force them out too soon. Then we sprint to the finish. I will check with the crew on fuel levels to verify the plan." "Excellent. I will check on the points of visualization," Willie added. At that, his co-pilot ran out to check with the crew. Sparky was worried about her strategy. Ivan had been a good sounding board. Losing him made this task all the harder. She decided that, to get past these thoughts, she would walk through her plan out loud, letting both Jake and herself hear it. At this speed, we're traveling about 90 feet per second. The Iron Eagle is about 400 feet long, and we are about another 150 feet behind her. So we are currently a little over 6 seconds behind them. We need to be less than 270 feet from the Iron Eagle's nose to win the regatta. That's 2/3 of her length. To be safe, we need to be less than half of her length away when it crosses the finish line. She and Jake looked at each other. The last two victories were well-timed sprints. A boiler sprint now might endanger the crew, not to mention the crowd in Munich. Sparky swallowed hard. Captain Swenson looked at his watch. At this speed, they could cross the finish line in about 8 minutes. Neither of his opponents were in sight. He silently congratulated himself on the modularity and composability of his airship design. He smiled, nodded to himself, and pictured the podium at the finish line with a tall Swede at a loud whooshing sound followed by a hiss, and the deacceleration of the north wind sent the crew off balance, grabbing for the nearest brass handholds. "Status!" the captain cried. The gold-blonde first mate anxiously reported, "Sir, some of the secondary heating pipes have melted. We are losing steam into the firebox. We can only give you about a quarter power now, and we cannot add more fuel to the secondaries at this time." "Hivette, what's our alternative?" "We can seal off the secondary firebox, allow it to pressurize, and keep going. However, we may foul the engine if we do." "Damn the engine! Seal off the secondary, and give me 10 more minutes of steam." "Aye, aye." 4 of the Swedish crew grabbed their thick, heat-protecting gloves and scrambled through the toolbox for the right wrenches. They cranked down the seals on the secondary heating unit, despite the water vapor that was spurting out in sticky, hot, swirling clouds. The fire within died with a horrible sound, and the whole unit trembled under the shock of being pressurized. The propellers grudgingly continued to turn, and the airship went from locomotive speed to penny-farthing speed. The crowd at Ludwig-Vorstadt Field gasped as the north wind's venting tubes suddenly gushed black smoke, and the airship slowed. The steam engine, which was audible, lost its high pitch. The whoosh of the high-speed propellers stopped, even though the devices continued to turn. The individual blades were now visible as they swung through their arcs. The race became watching an ailing, floating sausage drift towards the finish line. The crowd was consumed by their singular desire for the sound of their cannon signaling the race's conclusion. The minutes went by in agony, and the low murmur of "Come on" and "You can do it" in German turned into a rolling chant. At the apex of the incantations, the cannon sounded. The crowd cheered, jumped up and down, laughed, and threw their Bavarian alpine hats into the air. After the initial excitement died down, the other two ships popped over the horizon, the Iron Eagle in the lead, and the Birken Hare alongside. The crowd was back to cheering again, with the race reborn. To watch the behemoths at top speed was breathtaking. The nose of the Birken Hare was near the middle of the Iron Eagle, but the Iron Eagle appeared to be gaining on her. Everyone spun around in unison to watch them pass by overhead. The cannon didn't report again, since the first airship had already crossed over the finish line. The spectators on the finish line cried out when the Iron Eagle crossed, and the wave of cheers emanated from there. The docking of the airships went smoothly, despite the acrid smoke still coming from the north wind. The crews descended their towers to rambunctious applauding and hooting of the throng. Brass bands struck up, and the celebration was underway, even though the ground officials were still huddled and studying their watches. Erasmus mixed into the crowd, carrying the scabbard of his walking stick, not sure what to do with it. He had lost his policeman's sword, his revolver, and his sword cane blade. "Yours," a deep resonating voice from behind him said. Erasmus turned and saw Herr Holschweiler, the massive German who had broken his fall. He was holding onto Erasmus's sword cane. "Stick in hull of airship. Yours." Erasmus lovingly took back his weapon and slid it back into his scabbard, where it had clicked into place. "Dankeschön, Dankeschön." Finally, the officials walked in unison to the grandstand and made their announcement. "Coming in third place, 23 seconds behind the winner, is the North Wind," the lead official boomed. Cheers went up, applause rang out. Bjorn Swenson jogged up to the podium on the stage of the grandstand. He waved a Swedish flag in one hand and his hexagonal wrench in the other. The Swedish ground crew started a bouncy chant in Swedish that Bjorn swayed to while he enjoyed the attention. "Coming in second place, 1 second behind the winner, is the Iron Eagle," the official bellowed. The crew picked Willie Dampf up onto their shoulders and carried him to the grandstand. On the podium, Willie took a deep bow and waved his hands at the cheering crowd. "In first place is the Birken Hare." Sparky proudly took to the top tier of the podium. She raised her pilot's headgear and her 2 crossed flags of the Americas and Great Britain. Confetti rained down on the 3 pilots, and she smiled her biggest, trying to hide the emotional pain of losing her co-pilot. Erasmus could tell, even though he was a dozen rows back into the crowd. He wanted to hold her and tell her that it was acceptable to celebrate the victory now and grieve later. Suddenly above, in the crewless Birken Hare, a hissing sound erupted over the crowd. Steam poured out of the port side emergency release pipe. Mr. Wilkinson's voice rang out. "We just lost boiler number 2! And Sparky joined the crowd in a laugh. Erasmus felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned and saw a young man dressed in a uniform of Her Majesty's Aerial Marines, the same that J.B. had worn when they first met. "May I help you?" Erasmus inquired. "Sir, I am here to escort you to an important meeting. Please follow me." Erasmus knew better than to ask questions as to the nature of the meeting or where it was going to be held. All the information this Marine was going to relay to Erasmus had already been said. The young man turned crisply and marched off towards an ordinary brick townhouse. Erasmus was right behind him. At the door, the Marine knocked twice. The door was opened from within, and 2 more Marines crisply waved them in. Erasmus couldn't help but notice that they had revolvers in their right hand, both kept surreptitiously by the side of their legs, but ready for use if needed. Must be an important meeting, Erasmus thought. It was a plain entryway for an urban household, with a small foyer for removal of jackets and boots, and a plain stairway leading up to an upper floor. One of the door guards flatly stated, "Chief Inspector Drake, your sword stick, please," and held out a hand to receive it. Erasmus surrendered the newly regained weapon. "Please proceed up the staircase, thank you." Erasmus nodded his understanding, replying, "You are welcome." Erasmus took the first few steps upstairs. All 3 Marines stayed at the entryway. Erasmus continued his mysterious climb. At the top of the stairs was a short landing, and an open door leading to a small, carpeted room with comfortable furniture circling around a lit fireplace on the far side of the room. Another Marine gestured for him to enter the room. Erasmus stepped in, and the Marine stepped out onto the landing, closing the door behind himself. The fire crackled, and the logs shifted a bit, changing the way the light played throughout the room. A woman's voice came from one of the chairs facing away from Erasmus, strong and clear. "Chief Inspector, please pardon the secrecy and urgency of this meeting. Come forward so we can see you." Erasmus proceeded around the chair and turned to face the handsome woman who sat very erect, wearing brocade and velvet. "Your Majesty," Erasmus immediately knelt to one knee and bowed his head. "You may stand," she said in an authoritative voice. Erasmus did as requested. His head was swimming with numerous questions, which he was trying to silence so he could give his full attention. He also became very aware that his head was bandaged, and how odd he must look to her. She continued, "Since you are here, we take it you were able to suppress Ishield Telford's attack. Are we correct that you have her in custody?" "Yes, Your Majesty. She and 2 of her marauders." "Sergeant Fox is not here with you. Did he survive?" "Yes, to the best of my knowledge. He was gliding to the valley floor near Micold when I last saw him. The 3 attacking airships were disabled, so I believe that he was out of harm's way." "Good. We want to inform you about this assignment on which we sent you. Listen carefully. We are not given to repeating ourselves. As you were informed by Sergeant Fox, we were trying to secure alliances with other heads of state. One of our goals was to strengthen our association with King Maximilian as he addresses a strenuous internal conflict within Bavaria. As part of that, we offered to clear the routes of the Ludwig-Sud-Nord-Bahn Railroad, which involved quelling the upstart Ishield Telford, who has threatened us personally in missives in her own hand. We agreed to hold this international regatta directly over the area that Ishield Telford claimed to control to show that it was safe passage. From our reports, it was not clear if Ishield Telford would stand down or attack. Britain sent you on a perilous mission, and you persevered." She paused, but her eyes indicated that she was not finished speaking. "As you now understand, the other airships were not aware of the probable attack, since King Maximilian thought the route had been secured. The attacks are not to be discussed. Any errors in judgment by the officials should be overlooked. There is nothing to be gained by humbling the Bavarians. With Ishield Telford captured, the Bavarians can proceed with the railroad as planned, and King Maximilian will be grateful for our support." She paused again, eyes fixed on Erasmus. "Given what we have seen from this assignment and knowing your background—" Erasmus's eyebrows raised, and he opened his mouth to speak. "Shush! We have 10,000 eyes and 10,000 ears. Of course we know." She paused for only a split second and then restarted. "Knowing your background and given what we have seen from this assignment, we are offering you an opportunity to join the ranks of a newly formed agency that will work to secure my international interests. This agency will remain entirely secretive, reporting exclusively to us. Sergeant Fox has already agreed to be part of that agency. May we have your allegiance on this endeavor?" Erasmus blinked twice as he processed the offer. "Yes, Your Majesty." "As we had hoped. You will retain your employment at Scotland Yard. You will be requested for assignments in a similar manner as before. Your loyalty to Britain is recognized and appreciated. That is all. You are dismissed." Erasmus bowed deeply and started to exit the room. "One more thing. Please give this to the Birkenhair pilot." She handed Erasmus a purple envelope with the name C. Llewellyn McTrowell written on it in perfect script, which he slipped into his interior jacket pocket. In the street, he distantly remembered descending the stairs, getting his sword stick back, and leaving the building. He wasn't sure if he wandered the streets of Munich for a while or not, but he found himself back in the celebrating crowd. Erasmus? He looked up to see Sparky, full of life and enjoying the moment, standing right in front of him. Without hesitation, he leaned over and kissed her. Square on the lips. They both pulled back an inch, shocked that it had happened. Sparky grasped his injured face gently with both her hands, pulled him close, and kissed him hard. Well, that
That was romantic.
ends the chapter. Kind of romantically. As we continue Corona story time and the reading of the Bavarian Airship Regatta.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.